Gallagher Fenwick.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Hello. I'd like to begin by calling our panelists up on stage, starting with former Prime Minister of Guinea, Mohamed Bivogui, please. Casey Freeman, President and CEO of the African Diaspora Consortium. You're welcome. Over here, please. Thank you so much. Paulo Portas, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, hailing from Portugal. Over here, sir, please. Thank you. Obrigado. And finally, Najet Vallaud-Belkacem, President of France Terre d'Asile. Thank you, Madame la Ministre. Before we begin this exciting upcoming session, I'd like to launch a short introductory video, please.
Democratic institutions across the Atlantic face serious challenges, including populism, disinformation, and voter apathy. Interconnected struggles with political instability appear across North America, Europe, and Latin America. Strategies for reinforcing democratic resilience focus on fostering civic engagement, enhancing transparency, and implementing proactive measures against disinformation. What factors drive the rise of populism in Atlantic nations, and how does this impact elections? How has disinformation shaped public trust in democratic processes across the region? What roles can civil society play in combating apathy and promoting electoral engagements?
Thank you so much, all, for joining us today, those of you who are here physically, but also those who are joining us online. My name is Gallagher Fenwick, and I will have the privilege, honor, and absolute pleasure of moderating yet another exciting and hopefully intellectually stimulating discussion, this one entitled Democracy on the Edge, Election Year in the Wider Atlantic. Again, it's an absolute pleasure to be here at the Policy Center for the New South at the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. There's a lot to dig into under such a large umbrella as the title of this session. And while I'm happy to be surrounded by some very bright minds to do so, starting with yours, Casey Freeman, you're the President and CEO of the African Diaspora Consortium, whose mission, correct me if I'm wrong, is to support the African diaspora and positively impact its endeavors in a wide range of fields, from economic opportunities, education, healthcare, and the arts. And you've played, I think, a very prominent role in the world of higher education in the U.S., notably in the area known as historically black college, the historically black college system, the HBCUs. And you also are a published author. Thank you so much, Casey Freeman, for being with us today.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
And sitting close by, Madame Vallaud-Belkacem, a face obviously very familiar to people who hail from France like myself, where you served as education minister, I think, from 2014 to 2017 under a socialist president. After serving in government, I think you felt compelled to go back to one of your original callings, which is your commitment to important social causes. You worked as country director for the one NGO which fights extreme poverty and preventable diseases, and then you went on to your current role as president of France Terre d'Asile, one of France's leading organizations providing asylum seekers with support, accommodation, and obviously advocating on their behalf as well. I should also mention that you are, I believe, a visiting professor here at the Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. What do you teach here?
Oh, sorry. Gender equality.
Gender equality. Thank you so much, Madame la Ministre, for having agreed to our invitation. And also sitting by are two other former ministers and government figures. Prime Minister Bivogi from Guinea. You served as Prime Minister of Guinea from 2021 to 2022. You also held many high-profile positions in regional Pan-African banking and financial institutions, but also across various UN agencies such as UNOPS, the United Nations Office for Project Services, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. Before this, and I noted this because it struck me, this brilliant career, you studied at the Gamal Abdel Nasser University in Egypt, correct?
No, in Guinea.
Where is it?
In Guinea, in my country.
In Guinea. Ooh, okay. First mistake. There'll be many more to come.
I would have liked to be there.
To another Polytechnic 2000s. You founded Vinciamo Consulting, which is a strategic advisory and business intelligence company. And you're also a professor of geoeconomics and international relations at various academies in Europe and Asia. And I should mention that you are a membre d'honneur of the Academy du Royaume du Maroc since 2023. Muito obrigado for joining us today, dear Minister Portas.
Merci.
And thank you all again, merci, shukran, for joining us in person, and a big ahlan bikum to all of you who are joining us online. Just a quick reminder that the last 30 minutes of this session will be dedicated from hearing from you all, and I hope you will have questions. We'll also be bringing up, thanks to the help of my colleagues on the tech side, a word cloud with a question which I submit in, which I hope you'll help us answering. So let's get right into it. Democracy on the Edge, election year in the wider Atlantic. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack here. Dr. Freeman, if I can start with you. I like this title, Democracy on the Edge, and I'm tempted to ask you, isn't democracy by definition always on the edge?
Yes. First, let me thank all of you for the opportunity to be here. And it's a rare occasion, I think I mentioned earlier, that an educator gets to sit among former ministers and ministers. So this will be a great discussion, I think. Yeah, I mean, and I think let's just get right to it. We are in what I consider a cultural revolution. And it is really where majority populations are coming together globally, and they are anti-everything and everybody. Anti-migration, anti-LGBTQ, and particularly, if we're being honest, anti-race, especially African descendants. And I think that, well, for sure, it had its origin, I think, when in 2020, when the George Floyd event occurred and we got worldwide attention. Well, now we're having a backlash from that. I think
just the George Floyd incident, for those who may have been on another planet, was take place in the U.S.
where
an African American was put to death almost live on camera by a white police officer.
Police brutality, right? Exactly. And so that event, I mean, I think struck worldwide, and we had a lot of demonstrations worldwide, but now we are experiencing a backlash from that. And I think and part of that I can say is probably being led by who is the de facto leader of this backlash would be President-elect Trump. I mean, I think people certainly should have the right to vote for whomever they want, so I'm not denying that. But he's been very open about racial issues, and I think that has caused around the globe, you hear people say that it's better to be upfront. I think I was talking to a colleague about that earlier. Better be upfront and say, but it's not better. It's not better to. It's not okay to highlight everything. Like his first sit-down conversation with Vice President Harris was. I mean, before she entered the race was like is she really black? I mean, do you want the leader of your country to highlight different populations in that kind of way? So I think that is the other area, though, I think that is really crucial for all of us is the way in which education has been weaponized.
Yeah. We'll get into education with
Exactly.
Valo Belkacem. If I can just piggyback off of the fact that you're talking about education, because Casey Freeman was just mentioning race, identity. You served as France's education minister. In my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's an inherent connection between education and democracy. And when educational systems are weakened or are weakening, does that automatically lead, in your mind, to a weakening of democratic norms and systems? And is that also part of what we are seeing? And not just in the U.S. Obviously, the U.S. is a very prominent example. It's an election that the whole world has its eyes on. Right. But keep this in mind. 2024 is, par excellence, the year of elections. Elections have been held in more than 70 countries, representing about half of the world's population. Right. 2 billion eligible voters. And the U.S. isn't even the number one in terms of numbers election. Right. India and the European elections as well. Anyhow, just on the point of education maybe being another one of those keys.
Vraiment ravi d'être.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with you. Thank you very much for the invitation. First, to start with, quite obviously, democracy is on the edge, in peril. In other words, of course, it would be very difficult not to really take that into account. If I take a recent poll survey in France, at least 1/4 of French consider that democracy is not the best system ever. So I think almost the same, if not more, in the U.S. And it's particularly true in the younger generations. It is about 30% of young persons who think it would be better with someone else, with an authoritative person and democracy. Well, one has to ask ourselves as to what makes this democracy fragile and makes it more on the edge. Well, many think that we could say, but what I'm interested more in is the way in which there is no more a truth around which there is consensus building. There's only subjective and alternative truths. Therefore, if we cannot concur on this, if everyone lives in their parallel world, seeing things from their own prisms, so there could be no collective, no democracy. Hence, to come back to your question, whether school is the appropriate place to prepare future citizens and to develop the criticism and, of course, kind of emancipate them of their beliefs, of the conspiracy theory on which they are subjected to over the social networks. Of course, the answer is yes. The school is the best place because the rationale, the justification of emancipating, of course, having given collective prevalence on the individual. Of course, we should not underestimate the fact that school is being attacked. Within the school, you have all of the conditions in order for the school to do the citizenhood or citizenship building, but in reality, the schools are being weakened by at least three acting dynamics, and against which I'm fighting is something paradoxical. I mean that the more our societies are really getting cognizance of the ongoing awakening of the schools, the more they are brittle, fragile, and they claim schools to be competitive. So they impose on schools to be more competitive, which goes against the development. Competitive to whom, to what? Well, competitive within the meaning that we are going to ask and require from school very, very early to develop in the pupils the competition spirit, to give more importance to scores, to grades, to early evolution. And this we have to understand that does not allow the citizenship, the experience of democracy. It does not allow it to thrive. Because if you say to children too early, you need to know what to do, your grades are very fundamental, the children are not going to invest, and their parents only in what is being given scores to or grades to, but forgetting and so doing, of course, the sports activities, creation activities, everything that makes it possible for everyone to live together, so that's competition. The two other dynamics. This is the first problematic dynamic. We need to give the school the time of the school learning disciplines, but also living together and the criticism and critical spirit. The second dynamic, which is deleterious, which is the non-mixity. More and more so, the schools are from different backgrounds. The more and more we see that in all of the societies, for example, with a private and public education, with a separation of pupils, and disadvantaged populations ghettoize or ghettoize, which by definition does not make it possible for the schoolgoers to experience the otherness. Whereas the citizenhood, living together, the superiority of the collective on the individual makes it necessary to make the experience of the otherness, to learn about the others, to know how we can live together. So in all our democratic societies, we have to see to it that social mixity in school institutions be maintained. And the third point, which I also see being deleterious and not allowing schools to manufacture quote-unquote citizens, are the facts, the emissions, the interferences that come from the outside school and that invite themselves in the schools. By way of 3 examples I'm going to give. From the outside of the school, when we try to challenge the very fact that the teachers teach equality between boys and girls. Who is we try? Well, of course, reactionary forces. We see them thrive in France, say, no, it has nothing to do with, school has nothing to do with it. Education to effective life, boy and girls education. But in so doing, you preclude schools from playing its role of construction of a citizen who would be really keen on implementing equality values. Well, from the outside, again, when there are reactionary forces, challenge the very fact that a teacher, a lady, takes her pupils to visit a refugee camp. It took place recently, and she was under really high and vivid attacks by identity associations. So you are not allowing school to manufacture citizens that are well aware and woke on such questions. We can, examples are legion. Well, the ultra competition you've mentioned, where school should teach to non-mixity. Yeah, you've mentioned that social non-mixity and the interferences and also emissions from the outside world are many a thing that we can, in their capacity to create citizens' schools.
Mr. Bivogi is, I think, challenging our mental maps. We've heard about the U.S., we've heard about France, and I'm very excited and impatient to hear about what you have your eyes on when you read this title. The democracy under attack, election year. What country or what countries do you have your eyes on when you think about these concepts? I think you have a surprising answer for us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you to the Policy Center also for the opportunity to be here and have such a great panel. Democracy on the edge. The first thing that comes in my mind is fragility of the democracy.
Of course.
But it is also resilience, because there are still democracies that have found ways to continue to be resilient. And you ask me for a country, I'm sure you are waiting that I tell you United States, of course. But it is Ghana. You see, the reason
So
is
why
very,
Ghana? Let's get right
but
into
the
it.
reason is very simple. Last week, there was double elections in Ghana. It all went very smoothly.
Yeah.
The results were announced. Even before the results were announced, the outgoing, the candidate of the outgoing government called his opponent to tell him, to congratulate him that he won the election. And, and told him that we are ready to organize the transition to be as smooth as possible.
So the future of democracy is in Ghana.
At least Ghana is an example.
I heard it's
That
in
is-
Africa. I heard behind me. Well, let's
The
get
example, but what I wanted to say is the example is there, and it is there since now, I think, 4 or 5 presidents. The elections have always been fair and transparent.
So what's Ghana's secret? What should, weakened democracies see in Ghana in terms of bulwarks against the threats against democracy? What's
But
Ghana's secret?
I think you just spoke about it now. Is about the education of people. As people over time, they went through very difficult periods before President Rawlings' time. But he took 18 years to prepare his country and ignite the democratic process. And he lost the elections, but allowed it to continue. And they developed internal mechanisms to resolve conflicts. And those mechanisms that are completely indigenous works very well. We see it now.
Can you give
This-
us one example of these internal mechanisms that they put in place and that work so well?
They have informal mechanism of elders.
Okay.
But when I say elders, is both traditional and also intellectual elders that meet anytime there is a problem. They go there, they sit, they discuss, and they clear it, including during the election time. When during the process there are problems, they meet, they go there, they meet, and they discuss. They have also series of think tanks that accompany the whole process of, the democracy in the country. So I think, to me, yes, democracy is fragile, and it's fragile because, let's face it, governments do not always respond to the needs of their populations. People are unhappy on one side. Of course, the autocrat to be use that opportunity to put the political parties in difficulty. Because if you look very well at the grievances that are put on the table by those extremist parties, if I can call them, they are usually real problems. They are not fake problems. So because of that, they have followers. Unfortunately, in the process, they change direction. So, and in the Atlantic environment, where there is common border, common coast, common ocean, of course, there is a legacy of history since long time. Colonization, slavery, etc., etc. So we influence each other in the region. And therefore, it is always useful not to only look inward, but look also to your neighbors.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to keep doing with you, former Mr. Portas. You teach, so you have students in Europe and Asia, and so you're looking at future citizens of the world. In your mind, and we started tackling this with Prime Minister Bivogi, what are some of the bulwarks in the spaces that you evolve in against, the threats on democracy? Is it coming from civil society? Is it institutional bulwarks? Is it, tradition at times? And if we can take our mind off of, the U.S. and Europe and perhaps try to focus on parts of, what we call these parts of the wider Atlantic.
OK. Je vais parler en français. will speak French. I would like to thank the Policy Center for the New South for inviting me to be here for the Atlantic Dialogues, and I would like to also greet the ambassador of Portugal, who's also here. So this philosophical question that democracy is a system, but freedom is a value, as far as I'm concerned. What's important is to protect or to earn freedoms. I mean, personal freedoms, economic freedom, civic freedom, social freedom. However, democracy, as stated by Churchill, is full of vices. Well, we haven't found any better solution, and this is 60 years after Churchill made this statement. Also, not all elections were equal. So if you take a look at 2024 and what the Honorable Prime Minister said about Ghana could have been said for Cape Verde. Both of these countries are considered by the United Nations to be the most effective democracies from the standpoint of freedom. It is both Ghana and Cape Verde. So there's a sort of... And so what is sandwiched in between are the institutions. What is respected worldwide is the role of institutions. So what do institutions do? Is through representation, they mitigate and reduce the effects of massification. This is why institutions exist. Otherwise, there wouldn't be parliaments, but general assemblies composed of the entire population. So this is where the crisis lies. It's the values of these institutions, and in my opinion, the critical point, and I won't be winning any brownie points by saying this. What changed is the pace and the intensity of the threats on freedom, and the difference today is this digital democracy. This is what has changed the nature of politics. I mean, we can call it digital democracy and anticipate that it will replace or destroy the representative democracy. And the fact that there are these how algorithms are playing to our civic lives. Please allow me to remind you of one point which has changed the nature of democracy. This issue does not exist in autocratic regimes because, for the approach in autocratic regimes is censorship, and this is a Western issue, and it is not an Eastern issue per se. And the East is on an upward trend, and the West is on a downward trend, as we know. So please take a look at the mantra of democracy in the Western world. I mean, if you take a look at, especially when you take a look at social media, so what is complex becomes simplified. What is argumentative becomes insulting, very often, in fact. What is considered to be contribution to dialogue for a compromise becomes a discord. What is authentic becomes fabricated or manipulated. As such, as stated by Madam Minister, I disagree with a certain school of thought shared by Madam Minister, but the conclusion that we reach is whether modern societies have skills to tell the truth apart from what's not from untruths. So when you receive 20 videos on your iPhone or 10 images on your smartphone that are fabricated, manipulated, doctored, can people realize that they are being manipulated, that this is fake? And with the intensity, there's a wonderful book that I recommend for everyone to read, penned by an Italian author called Chaos Engineering. And so with digital, not only can you engage in propaganda, advertising on a one-to-one basis. And I will share an anecdote pre-Brexit. It was the first Western operation of massive manipulation. And in Wales, there was an elderly lady that had received an average of 12 to 13 videos on her smartphone on a daily basis with the electoral campaign, and she was a huge fan of Persian cats. And she started receiving messages saying that Europe will ban Persian cats. Vote leave. It's true that Europe has many odd and bizarre ideas, but naturally, they had no intention to vote against banning Persian cats, and so she voted to leave, and she had no other reasons to vote. And so this message was completely different from the one received by her neighbor, by her daughter, her ex-husband, etc. So this was really targeted one-to-one messages, and so we provide all of our data to these algorithms. They know what we say, they know what we reject, what we purchase, what we consume, what we browse. So in a nanosecond, it's possible to set a profile of any individual and tap into individuals' rationality and mindset. So if governments have shorter terms than the past, and if it is impossible to engage in long-term politics, because long-term today means tomorrow morning, and if we are completely captured by this identity politics, well, this is something that you can be a believer or not. We're all sons and daughters of God. And if we are not tolerant, if there's no tolerance for others, well, we will reduce the level of global tolerance. And so this idea of whereby we don't discuss the reasons, we discuss identity, gender, sexual orientation, etc., is absolutely deplorable. It is the moral principles that are actually in conflict, and I have a hard time where people start rejecting and refuse to tolerate otherness. And I believe that digital has transformed the nature of politics. There's this sort of TikTokization of politics. It's all everything's either in bits of 140 characters or short 2, 3 second, 30-second clips. And
it's obviously, it's pointing to one of the main factors that, is fueling the extreme polarization of today's political environment. But there is, I think, a need to sort of balance electoral integrity with, digital innovation and how it can lead to increased participation, which is positive. How do you think that balance can or should be achieved?
Yes, first of all, let me just say, I know it's very uncomfortable for people to have a conversation around identity. And so, but
why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is? Well, that's something I think that I kind of had this. I was thinking about the other day when I was thinking, the Washington Post tagline says,
"Democracy dies in darkness."
Yeah, democracy dies in darkness. Well, race relation dies in denial. The very fact that these issues are real and they are across the dark web, you would be amazed at the kind of information that is written about different groups. Certainly I'm much more aware of African descendant groups, but there are other groups. And until we come to grips with that, these issues are indeed impacting on every most elections, not every election, but most elections, particularly throughout Europe and the USA, those have been defining issues because this whole notion of how do I say blackness being somehow redefined in a way that it is negative.
But what strikes me is that as soon as the word identity comes up, for you, it automatically has to do with race. Are there other elements that fit in your definition of identity, or is that the first and foremost element?
No, as I indicate, that they have to be debated and dialogued, and not pretend that they just don't exist, that they're just going to go away. When the dark web is describing people in ways in which we would not imagine, because they are making things up, using history that's not real. And one way we can address that, of course, is the way in which we, I think I was mentioning the other night, is that having students, because this generation, I'm not clear on, but having students early on understand truthful, factual information, which is not happening right now. I mean, like right now, students go and study whatever they want to study, how that is impacted. But there, in the ways in which we try to construct our curriculum, it is a way in which students have to defend credible information. What is that? How does it come to be? And these kind of things can't happen if we are in denial that they need to happen. And that's all I mean, I know it's very uncomfortable, but I'm sorry about that.
No, it's not uncomfortable, not for me at least. It's quite fascinating. I wanted to ask you, Madame la Ministre, if you saw this factor coming in terms of the issue of identity becoming so central in the conversation about democracy. Is that something that you saw coming, and how do you handle that question?
Alors moi là-dessus,
So I might give you an answer that might be surprising, but that will take us in a path that is rarely taken. That is, I feel that our democracies are, I mean, with these identity issues, are committing the same mistake, or making the same mistakes as they did with social issues, because I believe that the reason why in many of our countries, be it France or Italy or even Berlin today, where you see this rising extreme right-wing populism, well, this is related to the fact that about a decade ago, there was lots of social unrest where people were saying that there were unequal societies, that they had no outlooks, and so overall, and these demonstrations that were indeed legitimate and structural weren't really considered by by institutions and political leaders. And so these public authorities, these political leaders, institutions and whatnot, gave the impression that they were completely disconnected and didn't keep their promises, basically, and were always, they tended to be very, very homogeneous in their hiring. And so this really upset quite a lot of people that ended up gearing towards the extreme right-wingers that had a very simple discourse. So with regards to social issues, our democracies have failed, because instead of providing solutions to these legitimate claims, well, overall, they have demonized this extreme right wing, and I was part of it, and I, in myself included, and we can see that really led us nowhere, because when you take a look at France or even Italy before that, and so this demonization was effective, and there's a Republic Front that is erected to block this extreme right wing, which then ends up, history, where you can see how history has unfolded with the extreme right wingers ended up leading the way. So, with hindsight, the public authorities and institutions need to be, sound and need to legitimately address these social claims. And so, which circles back to the identity issues, I believe that we're making the same mistake. As my neighbor was saying, there is a legitimacy in saying that we are we are experiencing racism, we are experiencing all of these very obvious identity-related issues, and we are in this zone where we are demonizing what we are qualifying as, oh, well, you're harming society because you're expressing racism and what. No, absolutely not. I mean, institutions should wonder how they can actually find right solutions. Otherwise, there are other extremists that will address these issues. And so I compel and urge our observers and our political leaders to address this. And so with these extreme right populist movements, well, maybe they would have transmuted these claims into identity issues. Well, that I'm poor, but I'm poor because I am white and I am replaceable. Is this what you're mentioning?
Parce que nous avons failli dans notre capacité à répondre à ces...
Because we have failed in our capacity to address these concerns that were fully legitimate, we left them in the hands of the far right that do not have any serious or solid responses, and that is only concerned by the votes and gaining votes and voices. And this is really problematic. And they're really researching and looking for a scapegoat. And therefore, the scapegoats are the foreigners, and they're growing and developing this identity problems, and all their problems stem from the foreigners, from migrants, etc. So they will stereotype them. And I'm saying that we should not give up, and we should regain this fight and focus on what we've done before. I've been in political affairs in a left-wing cabinet and government. We cannot say that we have not done anything, but most of the time, policymakers, politicians, they do things, but they don't have enough time for people to see and sense the output of their policies. And then there's the discourse. They make statements on TV, etc., that on, for instance, pension funds or subsidies for mothers, and people listening to them think that the subsidies or grant that is announced is going to be given right away. No, this takes time. This takes at least a year, and this is a way for, and this is something that really challenging the institutions, that is a form of discredit. So these are the things that we should see and review in our public policies, and the far right have this superiority and have this strength to make themselves understood. As far as we're concerned, we have some hard time to be understood and to also explain things properly and how we are composed and where do the policymakers come from. They come from the same political, social groups, etc.
How it has evolved, I often think and say that, we live in the era of Amazon Prime. People want instant gratification.
Exactly.
They want to hit a button and want the solution within the hour. But there's also something else that's very interesting to me, is the erosion of commonality, meaning our ability to have to maintain spaces in common, our ability to have a common understanding of what's fact or what's opinion, common values and whatnot. What's Ghana's solution to this erosion that we're seeing in other parts of the wider Atlantic? How do they go about entertaining diversity while making sure that diversity doesn't turn into extreme divergence, where people are no longer able to bridge the gaps, or no longer able to extend a hand to the other side? How do they go about, sort of protecting that ability to function together?
You're asking me very tough questions. I'm not a Ghanaian.
I know, but I know it's a country you have your eyes on.
And I'm sure there is a Ghanaian inside.
Or maybe
here.
Cabo Verde. Maybe Cabo Verde.
Yeah. Huh?
Maybe Cabo Verde.
Maybe Cabo Verde or anyone. But the issue, I was just telling Madame in the room before we came, I said you have influencers that have more members than some political parties.
Yes.
Okay? So now you imagine the multiplicity of influencers there. And then talking to the same people. And of course, the followers, as they call them, receive a multitude of information that's come from all directions, structured, supported by algorithm, as the professor just said, and they want, they don't want, they just get it, like the old ladies that wanted to defend her cat. So this is something that political parties are not paying sufficient attention to. It's not only the content of the message, but it is the way the message is sent to people. Okay, I think it is extremely important. I think the political systems we have in place should start thinking differently if they want to bring people back. You know, people don't go to elections now. They tell you Madame was giving the figures. Exactly because of that reason, because they don't find themselves anymore in the messages of those political parties. They are better with the influencer than with the political parties. But I think in each of these countries, will receive this type of information differently because of its culture, because of history, because of where this information is coming from, and what is its direct neighborhood environment. Okay, so I think Ghana is in such a situation that the dividend of the past political history really is still kept. They had someone like Kwame Nkrumah that left really an extremely good legacy as a nationalist, Pan-Africanist, tried his best, failed at a certain point because he was ousted by a coup. But then later on came someone like Rawlings, who is a military guy, but was committed to really the well-being of his people, to democracy. He went through some, maybe I will say, harsh, maybe methods sometime, but in the end, he handed power to a totally civilian government. And then in that process, he came out completely poor. He told everybody, I don't have an account outside Ghana. He didn't have one account outside Ghana. Even in his account in Ghana, he didn't have enough money to go and treat his wife, who was ill, and he had just finished to be president. So that kind of people, that kind of example, really rally people around certain values. And I think it is important to develop those values. Again, we come to education, we come to information, we come to the role of the parties in educating people, keeping the mind of people in the positive. And the culture also plays a role. Ghana is a country where still traditional ruling system is still there. And it is respected, it is valued. I've seen big professionals working in the city, in London, in the financial sector. When their turn come, they go back home and they remove all these occidental clothes, if I can call them, and put the kente, and officiate exactly like they officiate in the tradition in the village, keeping society together, resolving complex, paying attention to the needy, etc., etc. I think this is all this combination. So that's why you don't have one solution. But I think there is one thing that is central, is that you must pay attention to the people and to their needs, to their well-being. I think the essence of democracy is that. Do the best for the people.
I'm going to go to you, Minister Portas, but before so I see that we have 25 minutes left. So we have now entered our money time. And if there are any questions in the room, if people want to raise their hands, while people do so, I'll go to the questions. But I just want your last thoughts on this idea of meaningful reform to address grievances and sort of re-inject passion for politics, and perhaps more importantly than passion, just plain trust in politics. What are some of the ingredients that you put in what I call meaningful reform in order to bring that trust back?
Rational politics in an era of irrational politics. Okay?
So reason
That's
versus
the beginning
emotions.
for a discussion. That's the minimum for a discussion. Just to say one word,
Of course.
and then not to jeopardize time. But I just want to point that I don't believe that school is a place nor to MAGAs nor to wokes. School is a place for knowledge, exigent knowledge, and tolerance. But it's not a matter of ideology and ideology supply. I have one chance in a good public school to increase my social mobility. I need to learn, I need good professors, I need authority, I need exams, I need effort. This is not a matter for sociological discussions, except the sociology.
But everything is
universities,
politics.
okay?
Everything is ideology.
No.
You'll never escape it.
No. Science is not ideology. Sorry. Science is science. That's why I don't want MAGAs in power, because they deny science on the vaccines, on the climate change, and ideology on, you cannot, I have one opportunity to learn economics, management, geography, history, mathematics, etc. I will not jeopardize my time as a second purchase square for ideology. This is, I believe in science, I believe in knowledge. This is the role of a faculty, of a university. And then tolerance, obviously. And then tolerance with people different from you. This is just because I don't want, this is a trend of the Anglo-Saxon world to replace knowledge by ideologies, opposite ideologies. I don't want Trumpists and anti-Trumpists in the university. Sorry, this is not the way to be useful in the money I spend as a contributor to build an educational system. Okay? If they want to conflict, go to the public square, not invade universities. This is a place for science.
And debate, I would say.
And debate, yes, yes.
So thank you so much for that forceful point. We're going to go to question. I see a gentleman over there at the very back. I'm going to point to him. He's got white hair, pink tie over there. There we go.
Rabia Mukhtar, the Policy Center for the New South and Texas A&M University.
Please,
you know, with the failure of the UN global system to protect people, and with the veto system we have in the global governance, with the climate change, climate action failure, and with all what's happening around us, do we still believe that the current track we are on democracy can be retrieved? Do we need a new system of governance that really respect the will of the people? I mean, we give you millions of people on the street protesting against war, and we still fund war, and we still have war. So what democracy we're talking about? Is it democracy for the elite? Is it democracy for the people? What kind of democracy we're talking about?
Great question. Casey, perhaps on this idea that one of the reasons, as this gentleman so pointedly noted, that people are so frustrated with democracy is that they feel that it no longer is delivering, and it's completely blocked and often attacked from within. And the UN Security Council, as he just pointed out, is a perfect example of that.
Well, yes, can you hear me?
Of course we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much for the question, and thank you also for all my colleagues' responses, I have to say that. And I'm happy we're back to some aspect of this discussion, because let me just say this before I get to the other part of the response. The classroom, this is an important thing. All I'm saying is everybody in a country matters. It's not like 47 million, just because there are 47 million African Americans in the U.S., that our history doesn't matter, that it should not be a part of all history. So that's the point I'm making, that one group or several groups, or however they're defined, and migrants, that's something that should be on everybody's discussion, because across the world, across the globe, it's an issue that's important. And even there are differences in the way different migrants are treated. So I just wanted to make that. But in terms of like the conversation or discussion around what my colleague was saying about
democracy, do we have an alternative? And if so, which one? If we're no longer happy with democracy, what do we go for?
We should go for democracy. We should go for that. It's for the people, by the people. At least that's what we say in the U.S. And why wouldn't we want to go for that?
Because we're no longer happy with what it's delivering, and even more so with what it's not delivering.
Well, then we that's why we have dialogues. That's why we come together, not try to deny something is happening or pretending that that this group is happy or they should be pushed back or something like that. Everybody has to come forward. I wanted just today I saw an article. The reason that this issue around the race pushback is so important is there's an article just today in New Zealand where the Maoris are making a claim, and the article talked about, well, it's because the race pushback in that particular country. This is an important topic because individuals, whatever the country they're in, their voices matter. They should be included in whatever the educational structure is. They should be included in whatever.
I think I had a question behind you right here. Lady in the green, right here. Thank you. Right here. Thank you.
Thank you. Naiba Chile, I work for the World Bank and I cover Western Central Africa. I'd like to mitigate a little bit what you've been telling us about Ghana. Yes, there are transitions, but at the same time, it went through a huge economic crisis over the past year. And I want you to also look at and maybe address, what is happening, what has happened in the Sahel. We have had like 4 coups, your country, Guinea as well. 9 coups in the past 4 years in Africa. Does it mean that democracy doesn't work? And those coups were welcomed by the people, and we have the return of the strong man. So what does it mean? How can you maybe address those issues, please?
So you can hold on to the mic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 or 3 more questions. I'll group them, and then we'll go to answers. If we can have a couple more questions over here to make it fair.
Yes, I'm the ambassador of Morocco to the U.S. Hello, how are you? You remember, I think 5 or 6 years ago, we were together in the Security Council. And it was a session, Morocco, under the UK presidency at that time. It was a session on sexual violence against women. And she was speaking only about democracy, education, and I think it is key. In conflict resolution, education, and especially women and democracy is key. So today, do you think things are moving after you left the Ministry of Education in France? How, in Africa, from an African perspective, can we promote these shared values? And Paulo, I was waiting to hear your points on the evolution in Europe today, and we would like you to, you have great experience in this issue, so if you can brief us about how we can move forward in this connection in Europe. Because Europe is now changing, the project is losing its... Thank you.
Thank you so much. Question from the gentleman in the glasses in the first row over here. If you can bring a mic.
There's someone from Ghana here.
There's someone from Ghana. We have a question about Ghana already. Please, go ahead.
Khalid Chegawi, Senior Fellow Policy Center for the New South. Monsieur le Premier Ministre, bonjour. J'ai juste une question.
Minister, I fully agree with the lady. Of course, there are elections and cases of elections that are going pretty well and smoothly, but we do have some situations of doubt. In Ghana, it was the same. In Senegal, it was the same, and I admire the Cape Verde model. They had a beautiful alternance with Mauritius, and it's been going well so far. 2 islands, but they're not under the Francophone or traditional and conventional and incumbent Francophone or English. speaking model, but they have kept their. Sometimes we have kept that cultural rooting that really are challenging and scaring. So we have sometimes a shaking, or rather travesting these elections. Sometimes elections are really faded out, and through populist movement in Tunisia, for instance, the president has managed to be elected, and at the end of the day, it became an autocracy. So Mrs. Najat knows this. We are the only continent in the world that teaches their children in primary school in foreign languages, and so far we have no other country, even in North Africa, where we believe we have a national language. We are taught with in foreign countries is how can you convey national values with foreign cultures and foreign languages, and this is a real problem.
De logarithme.
Oui.
Il va falloir s'y mettre. Je me rappelle toujours.
I often remember this example or this case study from high school. We were not allowed to use calculators, actually. This is a simple example I'm mentioning to understand how we can best integrate these elements within our youth's education. We cannot impose these same methods that we once knew to these new generations. We need to enable our students, and I'm not able today to cope with this level of modernization when it comes to technology, for example.
Shortcomings.
No, yeah. Is he speaking? Is he speaking? Ghana. Let him speak. Let him first speak and then carry on.
Okay, by popular demand, so from Ghana, I've lost control of the room. Ghana has taken over.
By spontaneous majority.
There we go. Please, sir.
Thank you very much. When good things are coming out of Africa, we must listen and hear. We are here. I'm Air Vice Marshal Hansen from Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute. I used to be the commander of the Air Force. And Your Excellency, you've touched on everything. I was almost going to say, when you mentioned Kwame Nkrumah, you didn't mention Sekou Touré. So I believe what we are saying is what you know very well. Let me just add some 3 points. We have what we call the Peace Council, and that was what His Excellency was referring to. In the Peace Council, we have traditional authorities who are members of that council. The president is not a member. We have religious leaders, Christians, Muslims, Protestants on the council. And it is part of the constitutional requirements.
Is it a sort of Supreme Court somehow?
I'm coming.
Yeah. I'll give you 1 more minute and a half.
Well, you took all the time, so let me...
Well, that's my job.
Yeah, so let us celebrate when good things are coming out of the difficulties.
Go ahead.
Second one, we have what we call an inter-party system where the political parties are the ones who run the methods and the principles. What I want to add is what we call the pink sheet. So the collation of the votes can be accounted for in real time. So you found out that a party could count how many votes that are being cast, and at the same time could know where his party, the percentages, and I heard yesterday was that Ghana's voting was 4%. It was over 60%. 60%. Yes. Now, this pink sheet method and procedures, the parties are able to adapt very quickly in real time so that it's transparent, it reduces the tension, and that kind of thing. Let me sell this idea quickly to everyone. The leader of the Electoral Commission is a woman. So when you involve women in such difficult decision-making process, that is the result that His Excellency is referring to. These are just some of the issues that I want to bring on the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
No, thank you. Greatly appreciated.
Okay.
You want to
respond? Yes.
You want to respond?
Yeah, I want to respond. Yeah, but Prof, the ideology issue in the school. Nobody, I think, here alluded to the fact that we have to allow teaching of ideologies in the school. But we must teach values in the school.
Oh, yes.
So, and values.
Factions, no.
No, factions, no. I fully agree with you, but I just wanted to put that into perspective. Is about values. Number two, to Madame.
From the World Bank.
Yes, my sister. I don't know the region, as you know, because you are just officiating now there. But one of the problems in West Africa, and also in many African countries, and I hear that, people say, we tried democracy, but it didn't work. Well, audit those democracies. They have never been democracy. You didn't practice democracy, and then you go and say, I have been doing democracy since 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. I'm sorry. Let's audit what has gone in our governance systems. The democracy was not there. And then we go and then we say, yeah, democracy doesn't work. Well, I'm saying Ghana is there, it works. Cape Verde, it works. And many other countries, it's working. Okay, that's why I spoke about resilience.
Sure.
So now, it doesn't mean that because we have democracy, we don't fail. You might vote the wrong people, or the less competent people, or the people who have some bias that makes impact on the social life, on the economy. I think if the Ghana will excuse me, we know all what has happened in Ghana with the economy, but that's not what was expected. But it happened. But it was, and in fact, the result of the election is exactly the correction of that mistake. You agree, madam? Okay, true. So I think that's the positiveness of governance, of say democracy. Of democracy. As somebody said, and I come back to you, democracies may not be good, but what better do we have to replace democracy? You know, it is very important. Now, the challenge today, you spoke about Sahel, is exactly to avoid falling into the autocratism, if I can call it. You know,
autocracy.
Even if you look, Hitler came democratically in power. He came and then he changed the whole thing for himself. And the way we end up by killing thousands of millions of people, you know. So I think today the challenge is really that one. How do we go through this turmoil in West Africa? I don't have a response, honestly speaking. And how do we turn that turmoil into real democracy? And again, for me, democracy is working towards the well-being of people.
We'll take just a couple more questions. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, my name is Rafael. I'm part of the Emerging Leader cohort, and I work at Meta at a team dealing with elections, basically coordinating the company response to threats around elections. My question is not digital. My question is regarding populism. Populism is not something new. We've been in that for 10 years, and it has been institutionalized. It won elections. It has been in some governments already, and it's not as if society was just looking at it and not reacting. So I wanted to ask a question about what are the main positive actions and responses to populism and responses to threats to democracy that you have witnessed, because it's easy to be disheartened by looking at cases in the US and some other countries, but my home country, Brazil, for example, there are lots of things happened regarding not allowing a president who pushed the boundary to be elected again. So I want to understand what has been done institutionally to fight that over the past 10 years. a good example would be good to finish this panel. Thank you.
Madame la Ministre wanted to give you an
Merci
answer.
beaucoup. Ça va me permettre de répondre à plusieurs questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I would like to reply to a few questions. I would like to come back to my colleague here on the panel. We should not make a very easy mistake, is to take our citizens for fools. When we speak about information, we cannot only blame algorithms and social media. The dynamics and the situations are much more complex than this. The discussions and the challenges that we face today are more informed, and people are more informed than 20 years ago through the internet. Facts which we deal with and we thought were our truth have been refuted. The Iraq War and the basis for the Iraq War, allegedly containing nuclear weapons in Iraq, was a lie. I think certain facts have been advanced when they were factually wrong. No, madam, I disagree with you. Well, I am very much attached to my scientific facts, and this is very important, this being my point in the education that we provide. It is important to fuel the analytical and the critical brains of our new generations. It is important to help them refute the status quo and actually look deeper into the information that they are given. The real challenge is to be able to overcome our own biases and this new generation's own biases across adults. We should be able to rely on the media, but the problem with our democracies is that the media are more concentrated. There are not sufficient funds allocated to the media or ethical committees, for that matter, who are fact-checking this information when people are actually putting forward some fake news. Artcom in France, for example, is a committee that is charged with reviewing news, and there are sanctions that can be imposed on the media outlets which are diffusing and advertising fake news. It is very important to have these monitoring badges. We have better monitoring mechanisms in the financial sector, for example, for banks and big corporations. Now, the sanctions for violating any competition laws or any rules established are much stricter. Now, for the media, we need to review the different norms and rules that we impose upon them as well, similarly. Now, I would like to reply to the question about situations evolving, and particularly when it comes to domestic violence against women. And this really comes back to going against protests, social or identity-related protests and demonstration against women. We need to have public authorities intervene against these sorts of behaviors, and unfortunately the consequence of that, or the lack thereof, would be backlash, which is what we saw in the United States. An influencer you may be familiar with, Andrew Tate, who was a big supporter of Donald Trump, and after having Trump elected, Andrew Tate was recording misogynistic videos targeting women and saying that men had won the battle versus women. So it is important to take matters and consider them very seriously. We have the pros, we have the cons, and we have, unfortunately, very divisive battles which we can witness from one group to another. Now, the people in power and leaders must deal with these opposing views in order to tackle them and not be in denial. Youssef has asked about Europe 2025, or the perspective for Europe for 2025. Now, we see a growing resentment towards foreigners, migrants, and tourists across Europe, which is something that clearly is bringing us backwards. This is not a rational policy because with an average age of 44 years, can Europe really survive without migration? That is a lie. Germany will improve. I believe in that. Germany has always had strong political coalitions, so I am not as worried about Germany. 2025 will see elections, and I believe that this situation will improve because without France or Germany performing well economically, Europe cannot function, so we need to act. And finally, my last point here, to promote a optimistic democratic message. It was in Africa that we had the most interesting democratic experience. The South African elections confirming the decline of dominating parties in the eastern part of Africa, in Mozambique or Rwanda, for example. The average age of an African is 17 years. They do not hold in their memory the history of colonialism and civil war. That memory is outdated for this new generation. But what is interesting, however, is the decline of the historically strong party of the ANC, and coalitions were formed. In Africa, this is not a particularly strong, or it's not Africa's forte to have coalitions. In Morocco, however, this is the case, the strength for Morocco. But in Africa, South Africa and Morocco are some of the continent's most powerful and most economies.
I would say this quickly. As long as there's respect of cultures across globes, particularly, I can only speak for my work with the African descendants, there will be respect for Africa as well, because it's all part of the same history and culture. So we have to make sure that when we're having these conversations, the wonderful conversations about, what's going to happen in Africa and how we're going to go forward with that, that we talk and have the same kind of, implement the same kind of respect across all other countries as well. I bet I can imagine that in this room probably I could say 10, 15 people might not even know what are the largest African descendant populations across, which countries have the largest descendant populations outside of Africa, aside from Brazil. We know Brazil is by far the largest, but the U.S. only has 47 million. So just think about those things when you are thinking about.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank my wonderful panelists. Madame la Ministre, thank you so much. President Freeman, Minister Portas, Minister Bivogi, thank you so much. And thank you all for this very lively discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a coffee break at the lounge area.
Under the high patronage of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, the Policy Center for the New South is organizing the 13th edition of the Atlantic Dialogues Conference, scheduled to take place from December 12th to 14th, 2024, in Rabat, Morocco. This flagship event will convene over 400 distinguished leaders from the public and private sectors, civil society, international organizations, think tanks, and the media across the Atlantic Basin, fostering open and candid discussions on pivotal cross-regional and cross-sectoral challenges. This year's conference marks a significant evolution, transitioning from annual thematic focuses to a broader, more inclusive approach emphasizing the wider Atlantic space's core values and strategic importance. The agenda will delve into critical topics such as geoeconomics, regional security, democracy, migration, and the energy transition, with a particular emphasis on the African Atlantic region. Participants will engage in over 11 plenary sessions, interactive town halls, thematic breakout dinners, and intimate night owl sessions, all designed to encourage meaningful dialogue. The Atlantic Dialogue's Emerging Leaders 2024 program will bring together more than 40 young changemakers across the Atlantic. These emerging leaders will participate in a tailored leadership, policy and networking program, fostering intergenerational dialogue and bridging generational and perception gaps. Building on the previous 12 editions, this 13th edition will be a platform conducive to navigating the complexities of the Atlantic region and working collaboratively towards a more integrated and prosperous wider Atlantic. For more information, visit our website, atlanticdialogues.org.